Today on The Real Story, a federal probe looms over Connecticut state government. Investigators focusing on a former top budget official, Mr. Kosta Diamantis, and his role in construction projects around the state. Today on The Real Story, Mr. Diamantis goes one-on-one and gives his side. It's all today on The Real Story. Good morning, and thanks for joining us on The Real Story. I'm Jenn Bernstein. In October, the federal government served a grand jury subpoena to Connecticut state government. The man at the center of it, Konstantinos Diamantis, the second in command at the budget office at the time. The subpoena asking for information concerning various construction projects around the state that he oversaw, including school construction projects. We don't know how this probe started, but it certainly set off a chain of events. Governor Lamont relieved Mr. Diamantis from his job as Deputy Secretary at the Office of Policy and Management. He was placed on paid leave from his other position overseeing school construction projects under the Department of Administrative Services. He eventually retired from that role. Now, since the subpoena became public, allegations have come to light that accuse Mr. Diamantis of pressuring or threatening town and city officials to bypass competitive bidding protections and use certain construction companies. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer funding at stake with these projects. Now, it is important to note Mr. Diamantis has not been charged with any crimes at this point. This morning, Mr. Diamantis wants to tell his side of the story. He joins us for a one-on-one conversation. Welcome, Mr. Diamantis, to The Real Story.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. All right, so, there's been a lot of coverage on this, specifically in our papers. You've talked with Connecticut Mirror's Mark Pazniokis. You went on WTIC Radio with Todd Feinberg last week. Now you're joining us here on The Real Story. Why do this interview when you're at the center of this federal investigation?
Well, I think it's most important to understand the topics that we're talking about, specifically school construction. As you introduced it, hundreds of millions of dollars at stake. When I began taking over school construction under then Commissioner Melody Curry in 2015, in fact, it was a $1 billion program per year to include the notwithstanding language that was brought in and the manner in which school construction was being conducted and the granting program that existed. Since that time period, we've reduced school construction to roughly a $350 million program, organizing the funding and the grant program, understanding what the projects looks like, coordinating with the architects in our office and the planning division in our office, ensuring that the projects are done timely, ensuring that the projects don't last 7, 8, 9, and 10 years as they have in the past. You should know, and the listeners should know, that when I took over with the team that we have now, we were closing projects from the late 90s and early 2000s, meaning these projects were lingering to close out to be able to even be audited and try to find documents. We were catching up on old projects, trying to evolve the program into the 2020s so that it wasn't still living back in time, and understanding how the program was working and how they were spending money with respect to the grant program.
So you were trying to make it more efficient is where your stance is, not necessarily do the opposite of what you're accused of at this point.
Absolutely. And we were trying to open up and create more transparency, get more folks into the industry, architects, construction managers, general contractors, all the trades, open that up and get a larger group of people, because it is a lot of dollars that we're spending in school construction, and we wanted to reduce costs. Connecticut, keep in mind, has the highest per square foot cost in Connecticut. We've taken a square foot cost from $450 when I first got there for a hard construction cost to $365 per square foot. So we reduced that. And we also ensured that projects would end within a 5-year period, depending on the magnitude of the project.
We know that Yeah, Mr. Diamantis, we know you've had a long time in state government, right? I was listening to you kind of going through your career on the radio. We know that you were a Bristol state rep for 7 terms. You served as an attorney in the state government. You got involved in construction services, and then, as you said, went over to the school construction program and began running it in 2015, which is what I think you said before, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, then under Governor Lamont, you reached one of the top jobs in the state here, becoming the Deputy Secretary of OPM, while also keeping your job overseeing school construction. Explain your dual roles there.
Well, first of all, when I had taken over school construction, of course, there's a changing of the guard from the Loy administration to the Lamont administration. Enter Commissioner Josh Jabal. And eventually he brought on, as he described him, a very close friend and someone he trusted, Noel Petra, as the deputy commissioner. That was through at least November of 2019 when I left to become the deputy secretary of OPM. In August of 2019, it was kind enough of Commissioner Jabal and Deputy Commissioner Noel Petra. They provided me with a raise and a promotion, and I was then director of construction management, meaning I had both sides of the house, state contracts as well as school construction, which I've had all along. And the idea was to work with the project managers on various university projects and other things. That, of course, was short-lived from August to November when I left to go to OPM. The problem was, it wasn't that it was I was encouraged to take school construction, and because there was nobody there to run it. Nobody understood the program.
Who encouraged you, just out of curiosity?
Commissioner Jabal. He also encouraged me to, because I wasn't sure I wanted to be the OPM deputy secretary. We should understand that the Office of Policy and Management is the most difficult of all agencies in state government. It's harder than any other because they have so much to do. They have the oversight of every other agency, the oversight of every other commissioner, and of course reports to the governor. So there's a lot of work that goes on there. And I wasn't quite sure that that's where I wanted to go. I could remember Commissioner Jabal saying to me, they've had a tough 2019 introductory year, or 2018-19, as you're aware, with what happened with tolls, et cetera. Some political expertise wouldn't hurt, and encouraged me to go. The idea is we couldn't leave school construction behind because it had evolved in such a place that my team was so coordinated and working together. It was best suited in the interest of the program, in the interest of school construction and the state, that it go with me. And so did my team, by the way.
Okay, so that went to under the Department of Administrative Services.
It was always under the Department of Administrative Services. What was required was language in order to fully give authority to the Office of Policy and Management.
Got it.
There's a delegation of duties that needs to occur from the Commissioner of DAS to me in that particular circumstance. There are certain non-delegable duties that could not leave DAS, the Commissioner specifically, even to myself or anyone else. Those specifically were the priority list, which is the listing of all the major contracts that everybody talks about. It is also emergency certifications, and it is also the audits, and specifically the waiver of audit deficiencies. As you may recall, in a recent legislative session, the past one, Hartford owed roughly $40 million in audit findings as a result of spending that occurred in the late 90s and early 2000s,
right,
that we reviewed. And of course, the commissioner has the authority to waive that, or it goes before the legislature to forgive. So,
obviously, you knew your craft. You got to continue doing that in this new role at OPM. But then we had in October, you were relieved from your duties. What did the governor's office? I've seen the dismissal letter. We have it for both OPM as well as the school construction job. But what did they tell you at the time? You were put on paid administrative leave from the school construction job, and you were relieved of your duties from the political appointment job at Deputy Secretary of OPM.
That's correct, but let's be clear about who the they was. There were no they. What had happened was I was visiting my mother, who had had some serious surgery. She's 90 years old. And at one point in time, we almost lost her in one of the surgeries. And so I was visiting with her, as was my sister. And I received a call from Secretary McCaw, who indicated she needed to see me right away at the office. So I left my mother and I went to the office, and I was informed by the secretary that I was being relieved as deputy, and that I was going to be put back at my DAS position as director of school construction and put on paid leave. Of course, that didn't sit very well, and I was quite upset over that and distraught by it under those particular circumstances. She indicated to me that the general counsel, Nora Dennehy, had suggested that there was some quid pro quo with respect to the Chief State's Attorney's Office. She indicated to her she was making a mistake. She, being Secretary of OPM Melissa McCaw, indicated to Nora Dennehy she was making a mistake. In fact, there was no such thing as a quid pro quo, that it was denied on multiple occasions, and she was in error. She indicated to me she didn't want to hear that, and they were proceeding forward. Paul Mounds, the Chief of Staff, was with her, and that they were proceeding forward with the removal of myself from the deputy role, and of course paid on paid leave. And she also indicated to the secretary, who indicated to me, that the Chief State's Attorney would be before the commission.
Right, so that eventually led to the Stan Tuarty report that the governor commissioned, right, which Richard Colangelo ends up retiring from. And at the center of it was, you know, how he came to hire your daughter in the Chief State's Attorney's office. So did you in any way orchestrate the hiring of your daughter in that case?
As I said in the Tuarty report, and I'll say to you now again, the answer is no. I have not. I did not. That occurred amongst themselves and what they worked out. As a matter of fact, the report later goes and ends in the conclusion of credibility. I think it said of myself, my daughter, and Mr. Colangelo, and the Chief State's Attorney, Colangelo, as being credible. And the issue of credibility was the inability to remember when parties met again, or the first time, in what time were there any pictures taken, any type of evidence of when that first occasion was, some 2 years ago. And the fact that somebody couldn't remember that made the parties less credible. So we went from a quid pro quo to credibility.
They did say that there was some conflicting reports between you and Mr. Colangelo.
Well, I'm not sure what that conflicting report or information was, so I certainly can't respond to it.
Okay, we are going to take a quick break, Mr. Diamantis, but we are going to come back and we're going to ask you some more questions about the accusations that are out there against you. Stay with us.
Sure. Thanks.